Jerry Jones sure knows how to put on a show, doesn't he? Standing there during Super Bowl week, telling the world that the Cowboys are ready to spend and go all in. We've heard it all before. The big promises, the bold statements. But when it's time to back those words up, nothing. Every single year, the same routine. And here we are again. Free agency is right around the corner, and Cowboys fans are left wondering, will this time be any different? Because let's be real, Dallas has been running in place for years. Always one piece away, always right there, yet somehow always falling short. And why? Because instead of making the aggressive moves that real contenders make, Jerry keeps selling us hope and nostalgia. He talks about being competitive, but when the moment comes to take action, the Cowboys disappear. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, and honestly, it's starting to feel like a bad joke. How many times do we have to hear the same speech before we finally admit the truth? The Cowboys don't spend like a team that wants to win a Super Bowl. They spend just enough to keep fans believing, and that's the real game Jerry Jones plays. But what do you think? Do you still believe the Cowboys will actually spend in free agency this time? Drop a Y for yes or an N for no in the comments. And speaking of spending, let's talk about the teams that actually go all in and why Dallas refuses to do the same. Every year we see the same pattern. While teams like the Eagles, 49ers, and Chiefs make bold moves to strengthen their rosters, the Cowboys sit back and watch. They talk about building through the draft and being smart with money, but let's be honest, that's just another excuse for not being aggressive enough. Look at Philadelphia. Just last offseason, they made impact signings, pulled off key trades, and kept their roster competitive. Meanwhile, the Cowboys, they barely moved. They let opportunities slip away, convinced that their way, the Cowboys' way, is enough to compete. Spoiler alert, it's not. And here's the biggest lie Jerry Jones and the front office want you to believe. We spend just as much as any other team. Do they, though? Sure, the salary cap numbers might look similar, but the difference is how that money is spent. Smart teams invest in impact players. The Cowboys? They hand out questionable contracts and hold on to aging veterans, hoping for different results. That's why Dallas keeps falling behind. Other teams take risks, bring in playmakers, and do whatever it takes to win. But the Cowboys? They play it safe. And that's exactly why they keep coming up short. So let me ask you this. When was the last time the Cowboys made a truly game-changing signing in free agency? Drop your answer in the comments, because honestly, I'm struggling to think of one. And speaking of money, Jerry Jones says there's a good reason for holding back Micah Parsons. But is he really the only priority? Let's get into that next. Jerry Jones is already setting the stage. If the Cowboys don't spend in free agency, he has the perfect excuse ready. We have to take care of Micah Parsons. And don't get me wrong, Parsons is a superstar. Locking him up long-term is a no-brainer. But since when does signing your best player mean you can't improve the rest of the roster? Think about it. The best teams in the league extend their stars and still find ways to add talent. The Chiefs didn't stop building around Mahomes. The 49ers didn't stop after locking up Bosa. But the Cowboys? They act like giving Parsons a new deal is some massive financial burden that prevents them from doing anything else. And here's what's really frustrating. Jerry's already using this as a reason to avoid making big moves. Instead of aggressively fixing the weak spots on the roster, he's making it sound like keeping Parsons is the move of the offseason. But that's the bare minimum. Every team pays its best players. That's not a strategy. That's just common sense. Meanwhile, the team still has glaring holes to fill. A weak offensive line, a defense that needs reinforcements, a roster that, let's be honest, is not built to dominate in the playoffs. So what's the plan, Jerry? Just cross your fingers and hope Parsons can do everything by himself. What do you think? Will locking up Parsons actually solve the Cowboys' problems? Drop a Y for yes or an N for no in the comments. And speaking of Jerry's excuses, let's talk about the biggest lie of them all, the One he keeps telling Cowboys fans year after year. Every year, we hear the same thing from Jerry Jones. I'll spend whatever it takes to win. He's been saying it for decades. But when it's time to actually make moves, crickets. Here's the truth. Jerry talks like an owner willing to do anything, but the Cowboys operate like a team afraid to take risks, and it makes no sense. Dallas is one of the richest franchises in all of sports. The Cowboys print money. Yet somehow every offseason we hear excuses about why they can't spend, why they shouldn't be aggressive, and why they have to be smart instead. But let's call it what it is. Being smart has just become an excuse for being cheap. Look at the teams that actually contend for Super Bowls. The Rams went all in and won. The Eagles make big moves every year. The 49ers keep stacking talent. Meanwhile, the Cowboys sit on their hands, refusing to make the kind of investments that could actually push them over the top. And the worst part. Jerry has convinced some fans that this is just the way things have to be, that this conservative approach is somehow the right way to build a team. But how many more years do we need to see this fail before we wake up? So here's the question. Do you actually believe Jerry Jones still wants to win a Super Bowl? Vote yes or no in the comments. And if you think all this is frustrating, just wait. Because the way the Cowboys handle their roster planning, that's where the real hypocrisy kicks. And here's the part that really stings. Dallas constantly puts itself at a disadvantage on purpose. Year after year, this front office refuses to strengthen the roster when it matters most. Look around the league. The best teams don't wait. They identify weaknesses and attack free agency or the trade market to fix them. The Chiefs lost Tyreek Hill. They adjusted. The Eagles needed a better defense. They went out and got the guys they needed. The 49ers realized they needed a quarterback who could stay healthy. They built around Brock Purdy and stacked talent everywhere else. And the Cowboys? They sit back, do just enough to keep fans hopeful, and then act surprised when they come up short again. And somehow, Jerry Jones still expects us to believe this team can win a Super Bowl without making serious moves. Let's be real. Dallas has been running on talent alone. There's no real strategy, no real urgency. And the worst part? Every time the Cowboys let a free agency period slip by, it becomes even harder to compete the next year. So here's the question for you. On a scale from 0 to 10, what grade would you give the Cowboys front office for this offseason? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're feeling frustrated, don't worry. We're about to talk about the only way this franchise can turn things around. All right, let's be honest. If nothing changes, the Cowboys are going to be stuck in this same cycle forever. The front office can talk all they want about doing things the right way, but the reality is simple. This team will never truly compete until they start acting like a real contender. So what needs to happen? First, Jerry Jones and this front office need to stop treating free agency like an afterthought. The best teams don't just build through the draft. They spend when necessary to fill the gaps and maximize their championship window. Dallas? They sit on their hands and watch talent go elsewhere. That has to change. Second, the Cowboys need to listen to the fans. You're the heartbeat of this franchise. You see the problems. You know this team needs reinforcements. If enough pressure builds, maybe, just maybe, Jerry and Stephen Jones will finally be forced to act. And finally, the Cowboys need to start thinking like winners. That means not just aiming to make the playoffs, but actually building a team that can win it all. The Chiefs, the 49ers, the Eagles, they all attack the offseason with a purpose. Dallas? They play it safe and hope for the best. That strategy isn't working. So now, I have one last question for you. Do you still believe the Cowboys can turn things around? Let me know in the comments. And if you're tired of seeing this team stuck in neutral, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have notifications turned on. We'll be following every move this offseason because one thing's for sure, the Cowboys can't afford to keep getting this wrong.